Hello everyone, it's Dr. Stuart A. Swerdlow.
And Janet Diane Moria Swerdlow.
And this is the Expansions News Podcast for the very last week of July 2018. And you might recall that last week, I believe it was last week, that I talked to you about the soccer ball that President Putin threw, or gave to President Trump, who then threw it at Melania. And of course now I have a bit more detailed information about that, because the souvenir, they said, could have been bugged by the Russians, and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted that, quote, "I checked the soccer ball for listening devices and never allow it into the White House," unquote. But that seems to be entirely wrong, because the markings on the ball indicate that it contained a tiny chip with a tiny antenna that transmits to nearby phones. But rather than be a spy device, the chip is advertised by Adidas AG, which then says you use a smartphone app in order to use the chip as a communication device as well. It bore a logo for a near-field communication tag. And during manufacturing, an NFC chip is placed inside the ball underneath the logo. Now, of course, this could mean that it's not really a spy device and may not even be the actual Adidas soccer ball, but could have been something that the Russians devised on their own to make it look like that undercover, so that they could put that 160 terabyte chip that I told you about with all the information to take down some of the elite and the congressmen and senators and CEOs, etc., across the world who have been undermining your life and the life of the entire planet. And there will be more information as I get this from certain people who email me about it. And those of you who still think that President Obama was a very good president, this information has just been released, and that is that the Obama administration approved $200,000 grant to a group in Sudan with ties to Al-Qaeda, even though it was designated as a terrorist financing organization by the U.S. years before. The think tank agency that has found this out, and isn't it interesting that this was released after Melania caught the soccer ball, they acknowledged the administration, the prior administration, used taxpayer money to flow to the terrorist group even after its terrorist designation was discovered. And that was a 2014 grant to the Islamic Relief Agency through a U.S. Agency for International Development. There's a man named Sam Westrup of the Middle East Forum who revealed this information, and he says, more stunningly, government officials specifically authorized the release of at least $115,000 of this grant, even after learning that it was designated to a terrorist organization. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control designated the Islamic Relief Agency in Khartoum in 2004 as a terror financing organization because of its links to Osama bin Laden. But 10 years later, in March 2014, the United States awarded over $723,000 to a charity called World Vision Inc., and $200,000 of that money was directed to the Islamic Relief Agency, which was a known terrorist funding group. So this is how, or at least part of the reason of how the U.S. government and others, quote, legally fund and train terrorist groups globally. And you can now realize that President Obama, ex-President Obama, was up their butts with it. Any doubt that he was actually a Muslim and a devout fundamentalist one should not be in your mind anymore, because this is proof of it. Now, some of you may remember a few years ago when I did my Alien Agenda seminar, and subsequently as well, I told you that there was another galaxy that collided with the Milky Way galaxy and was kind of swallowed up by it with pieces of it. And now we have more details about it. because it's been discovered recently that the Andromeda Galaxy, our closest galactic neighbor, has been hiding a very secret past. And that, interestingly, is from scientists from the University of Michigan. And they discovered that this galaxy was cannibalized over 2 billion years ago, and that at one point, the Milky Way had a sister galaxy, and the Andromeda Galaxy ate it. Now, that sister galaxy was the one I told you that kind of collided into our galaxy, and then the Andromeda Galaxy pulled all the remnants of it into itself as well. The sister galaxy is called M32P. It was massive, third in size only to Andromeda and the Milky Way in our small section of the universe. And the revelation also reveals another mystery, and that is Andromeda Galaxy has a small satellite galaxy called M32. And scientists didn't know where it originated, but now they know that M32 is the remnant of M32P, which I had told you about years ago before all of this became public.
So does that make the Milky Way a twin?
It was a twin, but the twin was eliminated by Andromeda. And I also had told you, if you remember, those of you who do my work and read my work, that in that sister galaxy, the one that collided between us here in Andromeda, was the Scorpion Empire, and they had transferred their empire to the Earth at that time, and they were the original Archons. And I have information even more recently from a British researcher that said that water scorpions actually did have wings and existed on the Earth just about this time that I'm telling you. So everything I tell you eventually does come out on the news. Now, to your country, the Cascade Mountain Range, where Mount Rainier is located, is starting to, as they say, stir from its long slumber, although there's no sign that there's an imminent eruption. Nevertheless, they said that the eruption of Mount Rainier would be the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. There is a volcanologist at Concord University named Janine Krippner, and she says, quote, "Rainier is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world. It's a huge concern." Why? Because the reason for future eruption Rainier could prove to be very deadly, and the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, has carefully mapped out what could happen there, and it's clear that the valleys on the slopes are perfect for lahar formation, and several suburbs of the Seattle-Tacoma metropolis are right in the path of the disaster. Now remember, a lahar is when the ice and mud and rock at the top of a volcano melt. It's not actually an eruption, but it's from the heat within the eruption, and it races down the volcano into the area below. According to this, lahars can lift houses, they can overtake a bridge, they can take the bridge with it. In the past, lahars from eruptions filled up the valleys to heights of almost 500 feet along Rainier's flanks. And most of Seattle is built on the debris from the last lahar. Now, interestingly, Mount Rainier last shook in 1894 and 1895. Do you remember that?
I do.
You were like a little girl at that time. Yeah. But it hasn't really blown its top, as they say, for at least 1,000 years or so. So the next eruption, or lahar, could occur with little or no advance warning, and it's not clear if it's possible to evacuate so many thousands, or actually now millions of people in a matter of minutes. Well, we know that's not going to happen.
No.
And they said, according to this report, you only need a moderate blast to melt a large amount of snow and ice, triggering a lahar. And lahars travel at approximately 300 miles per hour, or 500 kilometers per hour. No one is going to run out of the way of that. Now, to another kind of explosion, a political one. I talk a lot about Turkey and their President Erdogan, who recently re-won the election as president. And they, according to this information, it says that he's wasting no time in making moves that will cement him into a dictator under the country's new system of government. And Turkey shows it is no longer a democracy and no checks or balances, and Erdogan will henceforth rule with executive decree. And basically, as I've told you before, he is seeking to be or create a new Ottoman Empire, which is not so good for Europe. Now, recently, I have been given information from a foreign intelligence agency, one of the biggest ones in the world, and they said that Europe was going to have a war or a civil war. And I thought, oh, that's very strange. I wonder what it could be. But now here is the answer. Because, according to this information, it said that the Middle East, of course, is on the powder keg and growing stronger, with Iran now warning President Trump of the, quote, mother of all wars, while Erdogan recently warned that a coming war between the Crescent and the Cross may be inevitable. And while President Trump suggested that he'd like to improve ties with Turkey and Erdogan, the former Trump advisor Steve Bannon recently called Erdogan, quote, the most dangerous guy in the world, unquote. Now, Erdogan has long considered himself the self-proclaimed Islamic Caliph, hoping to lead global Islamic Caliphate, with numerous countries in Europe now revolting against the massive influx of Islamic immigrants into their nations. Erdogan is telling Turks to be ready for a third world war and calling for an army of Islam to invade Israel from all sides. So that's not a very good thing, is it? Now, also in this report, Europe is on the edge of mass awakening, largely due to the carnage being created by the non-stop flow of illegal immigrants to the EU. And a leading member of a right-wing party of Belgium recently warned that they could be closing in upon a civil war throughout Europe, which is what the intelligence agency told me. Now here it's in the news, as governments lose control over illegal immigrants who feel that the law doesn't apply to them. Also warning that large cities throughout Europe could soon become battlegrounds, with illegal immigrant gangs now attacking police, churches, businesses, and other Western symbols. We're also told that civil war in Europe could be much closer than anyone thinks. According to Belgian right-wing party Vlaams Belang, he said, and I quote, we have reached the pre-revolutionary condition in which people separate themselves from society into gangs motivated by radical Islam, unquote. He also goes on to say, this form of violence can add or lead to a civil war if governments lose control and white people revolt. The situation is closer than we think. It could erupt really quickly and large cities will be the battlefields. Another person named De Winter, also in Belgium, tells the news, complete neighborhoods are already beyond the control of the government and the police because Islamic cultural structures have overtaken them. So people in Europe better watch out. And that video of that Swedish girl who went on the plane and stopped it from taking off to deport an Afghan immigrant who committed crimes in Sweden. And the plane didn't take off, and he was taken off the plane. But fortunately, that girl will be arrested and prosecuted, and the Afghan man will be sent back to his country anyway. So this is all Mr. Soros making a big staged event to make people accept this immigration and destruction of European culture. Now, I have told you many times that there's water in Mars, right? And there was atmosphere. Well, now Boulder, the Southwest Research Institute in Boulder, Colorado, says that there's new evidence to suggest that far beneath the deeply frozen ice cap of Mars' South Pole lies a lake of liquid water. Well, it's more than just at that pole. and that it would mark the detection of the largest body of liquid water on Mars so far. And I am going to just state that Mars is more Earth-like than the media tells you. There is growth, there is life, and so on, especially underneath. Another earthquake story. There's recently been a string of earthquakes off the west coast, up to 5.6 on the Richter scale, which they say can trigger a big one. It is occurring along the seabed of the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate, again in your country, Pacific Northwest. And they said that the ground is moving 1.6 inches per year, and that causes a concern because when the Juan de Fuca plate eventually submerges under the Pacific plate, then they said it will result in the largest earthquake in human history. If the entire 650-mile-long Cascadia subduction zone were to experience a full rupture, it could not only trigger a 9.0 earthquake, but a huge tsunami as well. And I reported on that, I think, last week as well. And if they're pushing this news every week, that means they know it's going to happen. So if you live in Vancouver, Victoria, Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, you better start packing your stuff. I can't say it again. Anyway, I just have another Israeli news because this is every week something going on. Well, every day. Israel's President Reuven Rivlin praised Serbia for passing a law that allows for the restitution of the Jewish community of heirless and unclaimed Jewish property seized during the Holocaust. And he said that this bill that Serbia passed should serve as a model for other countries. Rivlin arrived in Serbia from Croatia, where he met with top officials and visited the site of World War II concentration camp run by pro-Nazi puppet regime where tens of thousands of Jews, Serbs, and Gypsies were killed. And Croatian state television has quoted Rivlin as saying that facing up to crimes of the past is a moral obligation for any society. So this is very significant that Serbia and Croatia are saying all these things now and cuddling up to Israel because they used to be very anti-Semitic. So something's going on with Israel and other countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. So there is a very powerful reason, which I will discuss in depth in the September class, and you could take a cue from that.
Okay, now I also had the Martian story, but it was something I wanted to add that you didn't mention. Because remember, Antarctica is always in the news, so they're tying Mars, though what they're finding on Mars, into what they're finding in Antarctica. Yes. So we need to be sure and remember that there's always a way of imprinting you with information, so by the time it is released to the public, it does not sound so bizarre, so to speak. So they went on in a similar article to the one you reported on, saying that the miles-thick Antarctic ice sheet both protects water from freezing air and imposes enough pressure to lower the water's melting point. You can find bacteria in what is seen in Antarctica, so that means there may be a good possibility that what we found on Mars is a good environment for the preservation of microbial life. Martian life could have survived.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, but this is now what they're publicly telling people. So
it's more than microbes.
Yeah, and it said there could be more bodies of water as well.
Yeah, duh.
And then, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I know you and I were discussing it the other day, and I was wondering, is Drake some kind of a triggering word? Drake. Just the word Drake. I'm wondering, because apparently there's a rapper out there named Drake. And he has a new video where someone opens a car door while it's moving and starts to dance.
And that's brilliant. What could go wrong?
Well, so now what's happening is the regular people out there who listen to this song, they start driving, they open the door while it's moving, and then they attempt to dance. But what happens is they're getting run over by their own cars, by other cars.
Who would have thought that would happen?
Falling out. So I thought, what kind of programming is this Drake thing that's going on? What do you think?
I think they're just moron people, as usual.
Well, this article actually uses that word, which I don't particularly care to use that word.
Moron?
They do several times.
Because they're morons.
But the thing that is interesting
Who wants this? That I think I'll open my car door while I'm driving and dance outside. Brilliant idea. Nothing could possibly
It's just
happen.
these things that people do, and that's why I said, is Drake some kind of a...
And you want to know why this country is the way it is? This is why.
Well, it's just very bizarre that people would do such things.
Because they're stupid people.
And the other thing that keeps happening over and over again is people who are taking selfies who die.
And falling off cliffs. And
this, yeah, so just as an example, there was this one in Sydney, a Mormon missionary, a young man, 19 years old,
Right.
who was with a group of teenage tourists who were whale watching near, or I guess at Cape Solander. And so there's an official viewing platform, but that wasn't good enough. They walked down. Well, the rocks were slippery. He tried to take the selfie, and he fell
again,
over.
what could
and
go
that was
wrong?
Right.
Brilliant thinking.
So again, they're showing you more and more pictures of people taking selfies.
Dying, taking selfies. And what do you
dying.
think that means?
What do you think?
Because selfie, self-identification, death. If you self-identify, it's the death of you. You should not self-identify. Go into your programming alters instead.
And the other, go ahead.
And people, if you're going to take a selfie, look behind you when you're walking backwards.
Yeah, it's just that simple. And the other thing I wanted to tell you that I'm seeing a lot of on the news as well, which to me is very much related to this, is of this sort of thing. People just before their death or just before they're injured or sometimes during the process. Now they want to get you used to, for New World religion, of seeing people die and being used to that. So what are they doing now? They're doing things like animals are dying and people are saying goodbye, and then they actually show you the animal dying, or they show you the dead animal body with another animal that, saying goodbye, but of course the animals have a little different mentality. But all this is going on to get you used to seeing things die, being used to things die. It's part of New World religion that's creeping up creepily, slowly but surely. Okay? So with that said, we want to remind you that our September Spectacular is right around the corner. And remember, it is a limited class. It is filling up. And right on the heels of that is our self-healing webinar group. This group is limited to 20 people. People are already signing up for it. If you want a spot, you need to do it as soon as possible. Based on this book, My Affirmations for Self-Change. So during our webinars on Wednesday nights, which last an hour long, we talk about every subject that's in this book, bit by bit by bit by bit. We give you homework, and then the next week we go over the homework with you so that you can continue to understand what you're doing. And if you have any significant dreams, we'll bottom line those for you as well. Classes are very well attended, only 20 spaces. Sign up now because they will be gone if you sit around and procrastinate. And then what's going on? You're going to Tampa.
Then I'm going to Tampa.
What's
right
happening?
after Tampa is...
Well, tell them what you're going to do in
I'm
Tampa.
going to be giving a lecture. It'll be broken up on Friday night, half, and the other half on Sunday morning. Saturday is a training with Professor Dr. Charles Williams of SPOC, who will be training on a new medical device that will be amazing. And then Sunday afternoon is another investiture.
Right, and so the information that Stuart will be giving you is going to be building, remember, on Blue Blood, True World History. If you haven't read those are great reads that will help prepare you for the information that he's going to be giving. And for the healing work, you always want to remember, this is just the basic one right here, but I tell you, postage is expensive. I've even had people write in, postage to Europe is horrible. We don't have any control over it. It's what it is. But please, if you're watching your pennies, don't just order one book because it's a flat rate. We can get at least 3 of these healing books in there. So Hyperspace Helper is basics. Hyperspace Plus is the advanced version of this. If you don't have it, it's a great book. Healing Archetypes and Symbols is becoming one of our best sellers. So this one, and I can get up to 4 US pounds in an envelope, so I can get one more book if there's something else you want to read. Really great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Your webinar's coming up.
Yeah, I just mentioned the webinars.
And then October, and last weekend in October, is not my conference, but I'm a speaker and a presenter at the Stargate to the Cosmos conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah, and I also want to remind people that if people are interested in Mount Rainier, this particular book, The White Owl Legends, has to do with the first official sighting of 9 UFOs over Mount Rainier, and this was the same year, 1947, that my parents moved to Washington State and rented an apartment from Agnes, who was a spiritualist trance medium. And Agnes told my father how she was taken to Mount Rainier and shown highly evolved people, and actually saw these people shot and the bullets pass right through them. And her guide, one of her guides, Chief White Owl, actually gave her these stories, which were handwritten by her. She said Chief White Owl would actually have smoke written in with different words in the stories that she would copy and write down, so she got the stories correctly. And then my father saved this, gave it to me, and when the handwritten stories, I transcribed those. And when I met Stuart and he held them, he felt the frequency of Chief White Owl and Agnes explaining this book. So this is actually an archetypal story of creation. So if you have interest in the Native American culture, if you have interest in Mount Rainier and some things that are very, very mystical, this is a fabulous read, The White Owl Legends.
You
Don't
used
miss
to
out.
climb Mount Rainier
Yes,
when
I
you
did.
were
I
little.
love Mount Rainier. It's one of my most favorite places on earth.
Yeah,
So
well, that's not for long.
I love it. And so that's why I like to go to the mountains of Italy, because it's in my blood. And then that's followed the January class
Yes.
right after that. And again, that's one of our biggest classes of the year. So we have lots of things going on.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say September is going to be
September
mind-boggling.
we always build on, and we give you new research. So make it to September if you can, and then Tampa is next. And after that is January with all this other stuff in between. Be sure you like, comment, share our YouTube videos, our Facebook pages. Let people know what's going on, that they can control their life if they control their mind before somebody else controls it for you. Okay? So,
Okay.
that said, we'll see you next time.
Bye for now. Mind your P's and Q's.